as obnoxious as possible, and it was fantastic. Trolled everyone in my school. Uh, yeah. Yeah, Tolkien definitely has Christian themes. Uh, we did a group back when my freshman year of college on J.R.R. Tolkien's Christian themes in his books, and I mean there was a lot of depth there, and there's been a whole bunch of books that have come out looking at that. There's one book called The Gospel According to Tolkien, and you're right though, Tolkien didn't want anyone to compare his books to anything, um, including Siege of Vienna or World War II or anything at all. He always talked to. I watched a documentary once, and like he was really like taken up by the grass smoking hippie movement in America in like the '60s, and I think he was quoted saying, "My deplorable American fans," when referring to them.
It took me a long time to get through Tolkien. It really did. I tried to read I read The Hobbit, and The Hobbit was good. And then I tried to read Fellowship, and I remember I got like 12 pages in. I'm like, what the heck just is happening? I don't even know what is going on. And I was like, 13, 14 trying to read it. I'm like, this is just ridiculous. I'm not even going to go there.
Oh, I know. I had a family friend gift me The Hobbit as a book to read, and I read the first 5 pages, put it down for several years later, and then like once we were forced to read it in middle school, and we watched the terrible animated version of The Hobbit, which was a nightmare. I still can't believe that they actually did that.
It was
And
very
then
bad.
it's terrible.
It's
And
so
then I
bad.
saw my cousin said you really need to go watch the Lord of the Rings movies, and so I watched the Fellowship of the Ring and was instantly hooked. And then I read the book. So I watched the movies first, and then I got into the books. And I think I've reread The Hobbit like 4 or 5 times now because The Hobbit reads the fastest.
Yeah.
Um, the Fellowship, Two Towers, Return of the King. I mean, you are reading a work that is, uh, I don't even, it's like an anthology of history. It takes dedication to read it, but if you get into it and you get hooked, you just gobble it up. And then in high school, I was given the opportunity to do an independent study where I was able to like have my own curriculum, and I used the opportunity to read the Silmarillion because it's like a collection of short stories. I figured, if and it was meant to be a new mythology, for England. So I figured, it would be good, and the teacher approved it, and I was able to read through it, and I did an essay on the various stories in the Silmarillion, comparing them to Norse myth and also Greek and Roman myth.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it was fun. That's what it pays to be. If I mean, I wasn't ever in like the gifted program in my school because they test for it, and I'm
Yep.
not a good standardized test taker. But my grades were really, really good, and I was able to sort of argue my way into getting like independent study. So I did the mythology class, and then I also did a class on the Renaissance and Reformation, which was actually the first time I was exposed to the concept of Western education, because the book that they had for the Renaissance and Reformation course was a Western civilization textbook. And my school district had long dispensed with the whole idea of Western civilization as a subject matter. And it like got me really thinking about where American education is today and where it had been in the past, and whether or not that was beneficial or negative. Because I mean, I don't think anyone walking down the street knows, and I mean, unless they just into that sort of thing, like who Charlemagne was,
Yeah, no.
um, who was probably the most important figure in Western history, um, on so many levels, um, because he essentially founded Europe. He is the ancestral father of the French, of the Germans, um, and he's just huge. And without him, I mean, he's the one who brought learning back to Europe during the Dark Ages. He's the one who basically started everything that would become what Europe became. And the founding of America, I mean, it all goes back to Charlemagne. Charles the Great, Karl der Großen, and every culture has their own name for him, but it's insane. And his father, Charles Martel, is also extremely significant because he was the one who basically put an end to the Muslim expansion into Europe. He stopped the Moors in the Pyrenees Mountains, which are the mountains between France and Spain, and albeit the Moors were not going to make a huge expansion to Europe. It was a small, invasion that they were doing. It was still, part of this continued expansion of Islam from its birth, and it was immensely significant because the West remained would become Christendom, which would spur Christendom throughout the world, and for better or for worse. And it's really the reason why all of Europe didn't necessarily become Muslim. Huge, huge stuff. And it actually was why the Inquisition was so bad in Spain as opposed to other places, because of the Moorish influences in the culture. I mean, Catholicism had to very develop against not only the Moors that were there, but also a significant Jewish population. And I mean, the reason why I think we see the Inquisition as being so um, severe is because of that history. It's constant war over identity. Roy Van, that isn't fair. You can't call him France's hero. He was the kingdom of the Franks. Has nothing. The Franks were all over. They were in Germany, they were in Alsace, they were in Belgium. They were in the modern day Netherlands. Do not cloud his memory. You could not. They would not have referred to it as France, Royven. They would have referred to it, if anything, as Gallia, or Gaul, or something like that. They would Frank or the Frankish Empire for the English. There is no France. in, oh gosh, when was it? It was so the 700s. Charles Martel. If you notice, I'm sure you can see it. My email is set to be JG 800 AD, and 800 AD is significant to me because it was the December 25th, 800 AD was the day that the Pope in Rome crowned Charlemagne king of the Franks and king of the Holy Roman Empire. Um, he it was because it was so significant. I mean, he and that was a pretty trying time too, because the whole reason why he was crowned was because the Pope had been deposed, had his tongue cut out, and was sent off to a cloister while a bunch of other these mini popes just sort of took over. And Charlemagne came down at the Pope's request and restored him to the papacy, and that's how he got the crown. Gosh, history is so interesting. People need to study it more. Love it.
What happened?
Well, I think the culture as a whole decided that, I wouldn't say, modern modern education theory centers more around creating good citizens than it does creating people who are well-rounded individuals. There's this divide, and it's actually sort of modern today, between the classical school and the modern school. And so modern schools of thought sort of go with the newest teaching trends of the day. And it started with Dewey and a bunch of these other people. But long story short, it's constantly changing. It's constantly changing in terms of the methods for teaching, and it's very global and international in focus. So people learn a lot of significant events for global history, but they don't tend to learn a lot of their own local history or history that shapes their individual identities, which is more true of the classical school. The classical school tends to focus on the importance of history because every single part of its curriculum is shaped by it. From how you learn mathematics to the emphasis on Enlightenment science, um, uh, everything. And I've really come to marvel at the classical school system. There's an association of classical and Christian schools because there's a movement within, but there's a lot of secular classical schools. Don't take that to being that it's only a Christian thing. There's a ton of secular classical schools, but they the vast majority of them tend to get much higher SAT scores, ACT scores, because they're much more well-rounded people. Um, and I think a lot of the current woes in American education could be solved if we took a more classical, if we went back to a classical approach. Because nobody knows who Charlemagne is. And, I was shocked when New York decided that they weren't going to teach history before 1750, as if nothing happened, and not included in their Common Core.
Common Core is just a whole other issue.
Well, I mean, I understand the desire to say, everybody's got to know at least this minimum amount in order to be considered a functioning person in society. But when you destroy teaching in the process, that's hard. Because, I mean,
I
in
think it's that.
Pennsylvania, in Pennsylvania, we're experiencing a huge teacher shortage because a lot of the old teachers who are trying to adapt, because our Common Core just entered in and into its fullness, are basically have to leave, because they're not allowed to teach anymore. They have to teach the tests specifically, and it really hurts individual learning opportunities, because you need to get those kids to hit that standard, regardless of their learning ability. And basically what happens, but if you can get those kids into special classes, then it won't affect your funding or your classes or your school statistics. So we have like a huge amount of kids in special classes that really shouldn't be there, and then kids who should be there don't get the individual attention because there's too many kids in their classes when it's supposed to be highly individualized, and it's just a mess. It's a mess.
Yeah, it's a mess down here too in the South. It's most of my my friends in my education department were elementary focused, so they had a lot more to deal with. Whereas for me teaching English, when I started my student teaching, it was right in the shift between we're still kind of using the standard course of study and we're still kind of upholding that, but then at the same time I still had to incorporate Common Core standards somehow, which was like complete polar opposites and didn't make any sense. I mean, I agree that it should be, kind of a little bit more centralized across the states. Oh my God. I am from Reading.
Oh, okay. That's
um,
awesome.
yes, I was like, whoa. But anyway, it would be a lot easier if it was centralized, because then it's like we did a lot of moving when I was a kid. So under Common Core, it's a lot easier to be able to shift and know kind of where you are.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's like just kind of like what you were saying, like this information they're wanting you to know and like all the other stuff regarding it. It's just, I do not like it. And I mean, one of the things that we had down here was, it was when you're in high school, it was very much organized into, as a freshman you learn this, senior English is reserved for British Lit and things like that. And now they're like, oh, well, you need to rearrange all of that within the English Common Core, and we're just going to teach hodgepodge all the time, and you're going to have to do all these things, and then somewhere in there we're going to evaluate you on stuff you can't even control.
It's nuts.
Okay. Oh, is my mic working? Wonderful.
Yeah, it's working.
Yeah.
Yep, we can hear you.
Welcome.
Yeah, it's been a while. Been doing a lot.
Understood.
Yeah.
I think we all have.
Yeah. Well,
So how you been?
well, I've been working a lot. Doing a lot of new study. Got into for a while a little bit of chaos right there.
There are some useful techniques, but you definitely should take it with a grain of salt. It's very postmodern, so it doesn't rely as heavily on earlier hermetics when you're talking about
Trust me. I know all about that. Yeah. I mean,
but like I said, if you take it from a technical perspective, if you read the philosophy behind it, it's actually very interesting as far as
yeah,
broader
absolutely.
study in esotericism.
Yeah, again, like I totally trust me. Like I've read thoroughly through it.
Did you end up reading the book I recommended, Hands-on Chaos Method?
No, I did not.
You really should. It's a whole guidebook, and
stuck
he
with
treats
Phil
it. He
Hine.
treats it as a technique.
Yeah, I more or less just stuck it with Phil Hine.
Phil Hine is good. Peter Carroll is obviously
of course.
the standard in that.
Yeah, Liber Null.
Liber Null Psychonaut, Liber Chaos.
Yeah, again,
you got to go slow with it because a lot of the people who are part of that tradition are very verbose, and they go off
Yeah.
on these really weird tangents, sort of combining concepts of quantum physics with
Yeah.
theories about esotericism. But the
Yeah.
core nitty-gritty stuff, how they talk about gnosis and the ways in which it's obtained, that's the more interesting stuff. People who are showing
Yeah.
their true colors, they're showing that they've actually done studies on these sorts of traditions, the histories behind them.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I read through it, so I know this.
Good.
Yeah. It's again, I realize in truth there is no background necessarily
Yeah, that's not
philosophy
the
to
point
it.
of it.
Exactly. It's to get results.
Hmm.
That's the main. That's the main study. That's the reason why people do everything. Um, and so I found what works for me, and like my mentor always says, take what works for you and leave what doesn't behind.
Sure.
And
And that's definitely a decent method for people who are
yeah.
driven in that direction. It's one of many, though.
Oh, I know. Um, so far it's been very useful,
Good.
and I've taken what's right for me, leave the rest behind. So is anyone else talking here?
Yeah, we were. Well, they were. I was sort of just listening. We were talking a little bit about the education system and how there's a sort of haphazard implementation of Common Core, and how that's reflected on teachers, particularly those reaching to tenure age. And it's making it difficult for these teachers to sort of stay relevant and stay within the system. And despite the fact that many of them have wisdom from which to share with the rest of the education system, the way that reforms are going right now are so rapid and so immediate that where there's sort of a backlash going on. And some people just straight up hate Common Core.
Right.
That's definitely the case. So I think ultimately it's going to reach somewhat of a middle ground at some point. There's going to have to be compromise, but to see where it's going to go, nobody knows. Nobody knows because there's so many different, particularly obviously here in the States, there's so many different states and so many different counties and cities, each one of them having sort of different ways of implementation. So who knows?
Yeah. I don't follow up with the education system.
Which is why I stayed out of the conversation because
Yeah.
I'm not an educator. I know a few people who work in administration, and they've relayed some of these concerns to me. So I do know a little about it, but who knows where it's going to go, really, honestly.
Yeah.
And I feel sorry for people working in education right now because it's a very difficult transition. There are good reasons for it, and there are bad reasons for it. And sifting out between those is it's like mining for gold sometimes in a river.
Right. Right.
So.
Again, I've been busy just doing that. Like again, I studied this stuff like Carol and Hein. I studied them for like probably a year before, but didn't really get into it.
It's different. It's definitely very difficult material because it is radically freeform.
Yeah, it's personalized for the individual. The one thing I've noticed is I very much like the idea that nothing is real, everything is permitted, which gives you a lot of room to kind of mine your own ideology. I find that useful.
There's something that you should understand about the general philosophy of this form of occultism is that is a modality, but it's not substantive. It is a methodology from which to explore ritual. It doesn't mean that you yourself don't have specific beliefs, that you yourself have certain conclusions. It's that during ritual you suspend disbelief about what you're working with.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's one thing that Hein actually touched on.
But heavily. You see, it echoes back to earlier forms of Hermetic religion, Hermetic traditions, occult orders, is that ultimately they treat themselves as a metaphysical type science. They treat themselves as something that facilitates experimentation with different methodologies, different formula, and that's core to pretty much any form of modern Western esoteric tradition. So it does still echo its earlier history within ceremonial magic. It's just radically implementing those ideas in a very, very different way.
Yeah, I mean, again, you're preaching to the crowd because I've read, this is stuff I've read. Again, suspending the belief is one thing that you have to
Mm.
heavily do.
And it's a constant exercise.
Right.
And so many people that you hear are, 18, 19, 20 somethings who call themselves chaos, and they don't realize that the very path that they've adopted is more work. It is
Right.
more work to do paradigm shifting. It's more
Oh,
work
exactly.
to pirate different systems of belief and be able to construct something that's workable. So
That's the huge shift right now. I've noticed with like Wiccans, a lot of them are heading over to chaos because it's that they still can hold on to it, and it's still something that they can kind of do because in truth, what is modern day Gardarian, ceremonial, what have you? Uh, it's become, just a jumble of everything.
I think it's far more simple than that. If you look at the history of Wicca, going back to Gardnerian and
Right.
Alexandrian forms of it, the initiatory craft that it was, it very much takes a romantic lens of medieval witchcraft and applies it within a framework of thelema. It's definitely a sort of ceremonial context. The use of the four elements, the use of specific ritual implements that are ceremonial. It definitely is an echo of Golden Dawn and thelema. And many people who come to Wicca, they come to it because they're effectively pagan or polytheistic, at least in the general sense of it. But they don't necessarily want to go to full recon, like I have, and actually reconstruct a specific hearth culture, or however you want to put that, Greek, right, Norse, or whatever. But they are general pagan. So as Wicca has become increasingly more eclectic and more solitary, I've taken the joke that there's a whole type of pagan that's basically the foundation of most of the pagan community, the solitary eclectic neo-pagan, basically. So if you take from there and you keep going with that, it's no surprise that they've become radically eclectic and at least even topically incorporate elements of chaos magic, largely because the techniques that it implements allows you to do that. And I know plenty of Wiccans who aren't even chaos, who are actually traditional Wiccan, who use Osmond Sparr's sigil method. They implement it in a different way, and they don't banish it with laughter, much in the way of Temple of Psychic Youth was said to do. But they are incorporating elements of this sort of postmodern occultism. Because it's not just chaos magic. It's a whole host of other things. There's post-thelema. There are things that are after classical thelema that have developed, which are indicative of the movement of post-1990, basically, where occultism has gone, and obviously there's considerable overlap with the eclectic neo-pagan.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. I understand that they kind of have adopted other systems.
Sure.
But my point was I was making earlier today with one of my friends is they haven't really gone. And I actually watched this video that talked about the same thing. They haven't really said anything that hasn't been said before. In terms of spiritual growth, and this doesn't just deal with historical context. It actually deals with
technique,
or just in general, philosophical growth. That their methodology, their philosophy is incredibly simple. It's, the whole idea behind it almost seems like, it was taken right out of a book from, I don't know, like, again, Ravenwolf does this all the time, but
D&D paganism, as I like to call
it. If you want to say it like that,
but I'm an asshole about it because I'm a reconstructionist. So
yeah. I like to call it just laziness on their end.
Well, I personally love the term D&D. I love that.
Yeah.
And you have to understand, I'm a fan of tabletop. I've done it for 10 years of my life. I really enjoy the 9 alignment system, good D&D 3.5, Pathfinder, and where that's gone. And I've played Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. There's definitely something for fantasy and playing a game and rolling dice. But there's also spirituality, which at some point you got to be like, where is the line in the sand between wish fulfillment and actual spirituality?
I I I personally, and again, this comes from a hermeticist, and well, more I like to align myself nowadays as just as a Kabbalist, and just to say, I heavily believe that spiritual growth should be the lead reason why you practice what you practice, especially if you're going to be a hermeticist, because having this idea that you want stuff has led it's not the root of Hermeticism. Hermeticism is about discovering yourself. There's a lot of study that goes involved with it. Um, you know, I found that deities and spirits are the same. Really, in truth, I believe them to be archetypes of myself. And again, a lot of people don't like to hear that. They want to hear that, there's some sort of astral entity looking over them, looking over their shoulder. Um, and I don't mean to say that to be a jerk, but I simply I find comfort in knowing that these things are part of myself, like how Campbell writes that of the myth and how all these things ultimately are part of the human experience. I think Hermeticism is discovering the human experience and finding one's divine connection with God.
Yeah, and
And
that's reflected in earlier Hermetic concepts, as
right,
above, so below, as within, so without. That's a core concept to a lot of those
right,
beliefs. But I think it's also important to realize that with any spiritual system, there's ultimately different variant interpretations. And it's
right,
especially the case of pre-Christian religion. That's why the Greeks had so many different philosophies. You'd practice Greek tradition as it stood, with all the specific rituals and trappings therein, but you could interpret it from totally different perspectives. You could be a Stoic, you could be a Platonist, you could be a Pyrrhonist or an Epicurean or a hedonist. I mean, there are so many different ways that you could approach Greek religion, and that's just one of many examples. Egyptian religion is incredibly diverse, and
right.
Hermetic religion even more so. Hence the reason why there's been so many different Hermetic orders over the last, 1,000 years.
Yeah. Especially, um, well, unfortunately nowadays, I feel myself though slipping into the way you feel often with what you're looking for. There just aren't any hermetic groups out there, and the ones that I wanted to join have been dead for years. Like modern day Golden Dawn is a joke. It's an echo of what was.
Yeah, Golden Dawn, Thelema, Rosicrucianism, Martinism. Once in a while, you see an Ogdatic type tradition like Ashram Sophia or
OTA.
in OTA. Yeah, there's a lot of different sort of orders out there, and each one of them has a different influence and different way of going about it. But they're all essentially Kabbalistic and Hermetic
Right.
in construction. And there are books and there are resources for solitary practitioners with regards to ceremonial magic, though it does seem a bit counterintuitive for your specific tradition.
Yeah.
It's a little
It's
easier for me because with traditional polytheism, it's rooted in the household tradition, and having your own altar and having your own rituals that you practice at home. It's essential. So it might be more difficult for you to be a solitary, and I do feel for you.
but again, there's a lot of people on Reddit who are in the same
Mm-hmm.
place as me. So we have a lot of communities, and I don't think there's anything wrong with going online for it. It's just the dynamic is going to change. Um,
Take advantage of it, make friends, utilize the resources that you can share with one another, and root yourself in what you can do yourself in your own explorations and what you are able to do in your own home spiritually. And that's the most
right,
important thing.
right.
I'd say that's the most important for anybody of any religious belief, to be honest. But I do understand. It is difficult.
Yeah, it's never, and the whole issue really roots from there even more so. There's not very many of us anymore that really want to grow spiritually. There's a lot of us who want to experience ritual use,
Yeah, there's a
but
lot of, it's something that's an endemic to your
yeah,
community, the armchair occultist.
yep, yep. That's and I had a recent discussion where, which we were going to have a prayer group together, and there was a lot of people saying, well, why, why have a prayer group? And I was like, well, to get together, to grow spiritually, um,
Yeah, and there's plenty of things that you could read from. There's various different
yeah,
Hermetic texts, Gnostic texts. There's all sorts of things that you could read from in the same way that Zen Buddhists would read koans. You can read together and share your interpretations. I think that's a valuable thing, and I would say don't quit. Keep
yeah.
trying,
Oh
because
yeah,
you
trust
will
me, I'm
find
gonna.
people.
It's just the reason I had to look into chaos recently is because of the lack of just, I have to diverse myself. Everything's
Diversify.
changing. Yeah,
Yeah.
diversify. Sorry, I have to diversify and go into very different methods because things are changing. Um,
I think, though, it's a little bit of a, I don't want to say scary, but potentially dangerous development if the only reason for your change is because of what everyone else is doing. Everyone else is changing.
I have
The
to.
impetus should be from
Yeah.
yourself.
It's not just everyone else is doing, but I want to take advantage of what's happening to be able to, if someone has something good to say, I have to listen. Um,
Absolutely. And speaking honestly, I do a lot of the same. I have a very specific spiritual tradition. But the reason why I know things about other polytheistic traditions, other pagan, neo-pagan, and occult traditions is because it's valuable. A
right.
lot of the people in the larger alternative religion community are looking for advice, they're looking for resources, and many of them are dual tradition or triad tradition. They're practicing various different things in different ways. So I think it's valuable to know a lot about these traditions because resources are sometimes few and far between. And I've been there.
Yeah.
I
Oh yeah.
remember being 16 and not knowing a goddamn thing.
Yeah. I remember. In that place also, I've recently joined a forum, which I hope I won't regret. But to really clear some stuff up, which it's a Wiccan forum, but I mean, you know me, I'm not a big fan of Wicca. Um, because a lot of these people think like they have this incredibly selfish view of how the world works.
You can appreciate Wicca, but you don't value Wicca.
Yeah,
And there's a lot of going on.
yeah. There's a whole lot. I mean, it's ridiculous.
But it's like that with everything. You have Christians, you have
Right.
Buddhists, you have polytheists. I mean, you have people from all around that are doing that. And I think more people should be called out on their character, their personal
Right.
character. And
Oh,
they
right.
shouldn't come at it the way that they're doing. And they most especially should not be so hubristic. And maybe they should learn a little bit of humility. And there are ways of going about that. There's ways of calling people out on their bad behavior without necessarily, you know, delving into being a dick. You don't always have to fight fire with fire.
Right.
If you make a good, solid, rational perspective without being condescending, you will gain respect, guaranteed. And those that you won't gain their respect. You've just vetted out the people who are there to start trouble and to stir drama.
It's just the problem is, it seems like the majority of the community is like that.
It's the majority of people, and it's endemic to our generation. We live in a self-entitlement generation.
Well, it's like, and I don't mean to say every single one of them is like this, but
No, they're not. They're the
they're,
ones that are the most loud.
it's just like, you guys don't even know where your origin is, where your origin came from. You read nothing else than Silver Ravenwolf.
I hate Silver Ravenwolf for the record.
Cool.
And a lot of people do. And many of the most intelligent and well-studied Wiccans I've met over the years despise that kind of what I like to call Barnes & Noble Wiccan. They pick up whatever is on their shelf at their local bookstore, and they think that's the end-all, be-all of all things. They've never read a Scott Cunningham book. They've never read any of the stuff by Doreen Mountain Valiente or anything like that. They don't know any of their histories.
Yeah. Right. So, There's some people in here I've never met, like Sarah. You want to talk about yourself?
I'm sorry, you broke up. Say again?
I haven't met you before, so you want to talk about yourself?
Oh, I guess. I always feel very strange when people say, talk about yourself.
Kind of put her on the spot there, Justin.
Oh, well.
The baseline is I am a Wiccan.
Okay.
Which is why I like to kind of sit back and listen a lot of the time.
Okay.
Just because it's it's very interesting. So it's like that. But for me personally, I mean, I like to think that I try to do like what you're talking about. Like I didn't become Wiccan for because it was the cool thing to do, which is something
I
that
appreciate that you did it for your own good.
yeah, for me, like based on the experiences that I've had and everything, through my research, it's the one thing that's kind of been able to closely resemble the multitude of things that I believe in. So it's kind of been that catch-all. As I continue to do research, it might evolve into some other form of paganism, but whatever the case may be, at least I have a starting point. And then what I really try to do is, it's just for me, it's like, any kind of religion should be a part of you. I don't think that you should have a religion without having some kind of spiritual seeking side to it, like you were talking about. Otherwise, what's the point?
Right.
It's actually a concept that I've been discussing with one of my Wiccan friends. She's been a Wiccan for over 25 years. And we discussed the differences, and I've actually mentioned this in the group, the differences between orthopraxy, which is very common in polytheistic traditions, and orthopathy, from pathos, meaning sort of suffering, but also experience. It sort of is, it echoes the idea of gnosis, having personal experiences. And many of the things that she's imparted to me are the reasons why she's Wiccan, is that she's had these very deep philosophical and spiritual experiences that motivated her to explore Wicca in more in-depth openings.
So Sarah, why do you think, what draws so many people like that to the Wiccan community? I'm just curious.
You mean of
Not like yourself.
I'm really not sure, to be honest with you. If I had to take some form of guess, I think it's like, if the only thing that I can compare it to is when I was in high school, and you had those people who did stuff solely for attention. They're trying to rebel against their parents. They're trying to do all these things. At the time, when I was in high school, it was a really, oh, well, I'm bisexual, I'm dating this girl, I'm dating this boy, I'm dating, this person. It was so, it wasn't even like there was anything there. It was just, I'm this way, because it was something to do. It was a way to be. And I think that more and more people are attempting to come into Wicca because they think, oh, I'm going to be a witch. And one of the things that I really try to steer away from is you can be Wiccan and not classify yourself as a witch.
Yeah, there's different ways of approaching it.
Exactly.
It's a magico-religious tradition, which is unique.
Right.
That's largely why it's similar and is dovetailed so much with Hermeticism, because Hermeticism is also a magico-religious tradition. It usually incorporates both in equal measure, the religious aspect as well as the esoteric, as a part of the same core tradition.
Mm-hmm.
But to reiterate, I think it's because it's edgy, because it's trendy, because it's taboo. It's particularly the case with teenagers who end up coming into, whether we're talking Wicca or occultism. And I've seen a lot of sort of baby heathens out there who get into Asatru because it's taboo, because it makes them seem tough, it makes them seem hard. People are going to go about it different ways, and there's different things to appeal to them. But it's ultimately wish fulfillment. That's what I was getting at earlier. it has this sort of fantasy element to it, and that's what they're on about, the image and not the actual substance.
Right.
But instead of getting angry at these people, instead of constantly berating them and admonishing them for doing so, I think we should just give them a little bit of a break, because whether they're 15 or 35, everyone starts somewhere, and
Yeah.
oftentimes where you start is not the place you're going to end. So I think we should just give them a little bit of a break and let them go through whatever process they're going through. If we call too much attention to it, we're just going to make it worse.
I've done my best to avoid giving those that don't need attention. However, it's the reason I guess I just get angry about it is because like everyone in my community, like they have the magical community, and I've gone to a couple of their meetings and they say they're open to everyone. Well, recently, I go to one, and I was talking to this gentleman, and I don't exactly know what he was. I don't think he didn't really know what, and he was an older one, probably 30, 39 or so. And he asked me, where do I have solid, keep my beliefs so solid? And I quoted scripture again, hermeticist. And I said, that this scripture, it has a metaphorical and a literal meaning to it. And I can read it for hope. I read whenever I read the Bible, I see it as a guide. I see it as a book of invocation, and I see it as ultimately, my own connection with the divine, as well as other books too.
Yeah,
but
you're using it for different purposes, obviously.
Right. Ultimately, and I'm not going to reject it. Like, I'm not going to say the Christians are wrong for that, or the Jews are wrong for what they do with the Torah. And I was, and he got angry at me.
There's a lot of that, you understand, and it's not just with Wiccans and eclectic pagans. It's with that. It's like that with a lot of polytheists. I've played host to that quite a bit. The Christio-pagan is viewed with a good degree of skepticism or outright hostility in a lot of communities. The best thing to do is to understand there are reasons behind that, and some of them are well-intentioned, but the way they go about it is definitely not. And it's like I've been saying for years, we need to hold people to their behavior.
Yeah.
Take them outside of their beliefs. You're treating me like crap. I don't care what you're saying, you are treating me like crap. And that's not right. Nobody should tolerate that.
Yeah. Again, when it comes down to it, I wouldn't call myself a pagan at all.
Understood. I've known that for a while.
I didn't hear that. You broke up that a little bit.
I said I've known that for a while. We've had good discussions.
Yeah. And because people get again,
it's the identity politique. People take whatever belief or tradition they have, and they make it so much of a core aspect of their identity that they can't see straight.
Yeah.
So, well, that's on them, my friend. That's on them.
That's on them.
Not you. You're going to do what you're going to do, and it gives you meaning, and that's all that matters at the end of the day.
So Sarah, talk a little bit like what you read. Who are your favorite authors?
I haven't done much lately, just because of some other stuff that's been going on right now. Definitely Scott Cunningham is up on my shelf. I have a couple works by Aleister Crowley.
Okay.
Regretfully, I do have Solitary Witch by Silver Ravenwolf on my shelf.
It's best to understand the history, if for nothing else, to know your enemy.
What do you have by Crowley? Because Crowley and I never really saw eye to eye. So.
Hang on. Oh, hang on. Sorry, my battery is dependent upon the charger, and it suddenly slipped out. Hang on a second. I'm looking at my Stiff. Crowley, where are you? I have the 777 and other Kabbalist writings.
Okay. Okay.
Um, and I know there's one other. I need more.
I've always, I'm probably in the few, but I always found Rigardi to have a lot more to say than Crowley.
He developed the work a lot more and
Yeah.
got into some really intense detail, particularly in different ways of looking at the Kabbalah.
Yeah, that was.
So,
Oh,
he's also a little easier to read, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
his mode of speech, the way he writes, is a lot more approachable.
and I would say A Garden of Pomegranates is one of my favorite books. of all
Yeah,
time.
Garden of Pomegranates is excellent. Tree of Life is also good.
Yeah.
I say those two kind of go together. If you're going to
And the
read
one-year
through
manual
Rigardi,
too.
yeah, you should read those both together. I would say start with Tree of Life and then go to Garden of
Oh,
Pomegranates.
I have read
because-
them. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
For those who haven't, definitely.
one's
look into
orange
it.
and the other one's a green book.
I'll link you them.
Please do. That'll help people in the room.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome.
Hey Frank.
Good. Doing all right.
Sound a little tired.
Yeah, I've been tired because I've been having these crazy headaches on and off.
Oh,
I know you had headaches a few days ago, so
Yeah, they're coming back, coming in, coming back. So I'm just hoping this week just passes and see how it goes. I should get better soon.
is it in your forehead or is it more along your sinuses?
Sinuses.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were you sick recently?
Yeah, my son was sick, my daughter was sick, and then my son was sick, and then it just comes. I'm like the third one that gets it. Like every time they're sick, I get sick.
That sounds about right.
It sucks.
You just need to be careful, if it's a sinus infection because your sinuses are all connected. You can get ear infections. A lot of bad stuff can happen. So
Yeah, I'm planning to go to the doctors,
Good.
and because I had this when I was a kid too, like, yeah, but never really checked it out. But I'm gonna go and do that.
people who typically get sinus infections, earaches, and the like are prone to them. My family, we're prone to them, so I know the feeling.
I am too.
Yeah, I don't like this feeling.
Nobody
I'm gonna hit the gym. I'm just gonna hit the gym and just tough it out, man.
Just don't overdo it. You don't want to exhaust yourself. And like I said before, drink plenty of water.
Yes, that's something that is the best advice I could get, is to drink more water. Always helped.
Let me know how the doctor's appointment goes.
All right, no problem. I'll let you know. You'll be the first one. You're my Facebook, so I'll let you know.
Cool. Thanks.
I'll probably go ahead and join back up on the Facebook group, but I had to delete my account. Not because I wanted to, but because more or less I had stuff to do, and yeah.
Sometimes unplugging is valuable.
And also, yeah.
Yeah, the reason why I didn't get Facebook for a while, I'm actually a little new to it, is because there are some people I just don't want to keep in touch with in high school,
Yeah.
because high school is still there, and this is back in '94. So, like, shit. Tried to move away from stuff like that. You know, when you have a family and kids, and your mind is different, but there's a lot of my friends that still have the same mindset from high school.
Really?
Yeah, it's like going back to high school all over again as soon as I see them. They're still doing the same shit. They even look the same, just with gray hair, you know?
Yeah. That's sad.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I see it like this. Some people are rabbits and some people are turtles. You know, it takes them a while to just grow, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. That's hmm.
But I'm thinking this way too. I think people change, but there's a core. I believe in an essence in people that are still very unique and very the same. Um,
Mhm.
Usually, I have very good attributes, but I guess that's a good topic. You know, it's a person's essence. You know, like what is that? You know, is it unique or is it the same for every single one of us? You know, I don't know what your thoughts on that.
I don't know. Um, hmm.
That's a pretty cool icon, Justin. Like
Thank
it.
you, thank you, thank you. Working on that. Find a decent one. I had uh, I had Cthulhu for a while,
Oh, I love Cthulhu.
and then my mentor got really, really upset with me, and she's like, "You need to take that down." I was like, "You're not my mom," and she's like, "Yeah, but I'm your mentor," and I was like, "Oh yeah, forgot about that."
Why? Why you had to take it down?
She gets really, really scared by it, by anything like that, and I understand. Like she had a very, very bad history with anything that dealt with kind of darker stuff.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
but yeah, you know,
If you mind me asking, what was your interest in Cthulhu? Like, what do you?
um, ego death, if that makes any sense.
Could you elaborate?
Um, well, it was actually due to a string of nightmares I was having for a while, and I usually don't have nightmares anymore. And after I got out of the hospital is when they started. Um, in some cases, you know, it's hard to explain, so I'll do it in the best way I can. Um, you see, I for a while didn't really know where I was going. And I was off the chat. I was off the internet in general for quite a while because I didn't have any path. I didn't know if I should remain with Kabbalah. I should go somewhere else. I should start up with chaos. And I went to bed one night and I wasn't sure, and I started having dreams that were really out of the ordinary. One in particular, I remember almost entirely. I was underwater, and I felt something drag me down, and it was a strange feeling because it was very frightening. But at the same time, it was necessary, and um, as I was dragged down, as I was continued to be pulled in more and more, I found out, oh, this is, and I've had dreams before where I've been pulled to Raya, but this one was different. Um, as I was in Raya, I noticed that time and space, they had no point in being there. Um, and I felt myself become small, become vastly, vastly insignificant to the rest of the universe. Um, to the point I would almost disappear. And I guess it was almost if it was any other situation, I would have been scared. But it almost felt like Zen. It almost felt like, I don't know. This is where it's hard to explain. If you've ever read Daniel Quinn's Ishmael, I don't know if any of you have.
There was a friend of mine that recommended that book.
Yeah. How the lion kills the deer. How the wolf stalks its prey, and it's the natural way things are. And in this moment, we're dealing with one of the old ones. Their hatred toward us, their feeling of resentment toward us. It's just the way things are, and there's no reason to be scared of it. So I guess in that moment, I didn't feel like a hate. I felt just this is the way things are, and it's okay. And I guess when people think of Cthulhu and they see the artwork surrounding it, the mythology, they would automatically say this is blatantly evil. It's frightening. It's violent even. But in truth, and this is where it got really weird, and I don't want to carry on with this too long. But one night I was in prayer. It was after praying, and I didn't understand why some things have happened in my life. Why violence started in my life, why depression hit me, why all this stuff happened. And I remember feeling, the same feeling that I had before in my dream. And it hit me suddenly, almost like a bag of rocks, that the reason these things happen, the reason they occur, is because it's like an anchor to our world. That if we get caught up in the bliss, our heads would be so far in the clouds that we would be of no earthly good to anyone else. That we wouldn't even need to exist as we are right now. And the terror, the fear, all that, it makes us who we are. If that makes sense. It's hard to explain completely.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because I was having a conversation with Frank a number of weeks ago, and he was talking about how some of his Sufi friends, they do that. They'll move around to different places, kind of put themselves off center, so they don't become too complacent. And there's echoes of that in many different mystery traditions, that you don't want to be too blissful, because then you don't really appreciate the wisdom that you've gained in your tradition.
Right. There's there's definitely that, to the point where bliss can be damaging. And I think that's where the old ones are, to not necessarily, I don't even want to say, maybe even I want to say help us avoid this. They are the anchor to the real world. And in Kabbalah, Satan is viewed not as someone who shouldn't exist, but someone who's necessary to exist, as to keep us moving in our spiritual life, to give us challenges so that we may overcome them and become closer to the divine. I think that's the exact same thing, or even an echo of that, what I experienced. So it was healthy. And a lot of people would shrug their shoulders and say, well, I'm still not getting involved with it. But I mean, I don't know what to say other than that, because it was really a personal experience.
Well, definitely thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. What I want to know, what is the connection to Cthulhu in that experience?
What was the connection?
Yes. Was it the sea? Because I'm trying to figure that out.
No, no. It was, again, when you limit Cthulhu to being an entity just under the sea, he's much more than that, or rather, it's much more than that. Um, it's almost it's just fear in general. It's a fear unlike that most people feel. It's a fear of being incredibly useless. And unless you've actively worked with it before, you won't feel it. It's very unique. I guess
What was it? The experience was more like a surrendering type. Could that be fair to say? Like surrendering,
it was more zen.
more Zen. Okay.
It was more just this is the way things are.
And you just, it is something that you had trouble accepting.
Because it's very difficult to accept that in the physical world that we live, humanity may not have a helping hand to, like, or I shouldn't say that. It may not be the end all. We have this idea that humanity is this end all. Um, that um, we own this earth. We own the universe. We are the end all to everything.
That we're
And
the center of the universe, which is
yeah,
a common trope.
yeah, and when that's shattered,
What do you do?
exactly, you feel small. And I'm not saying like spiritually we're left alone, but um, I think it's very, very possible that we are truly alone in this universe in terms of no one's going to help us out.
Even if we live in a universe with many different intelligent life on different planets, even if there's a significant amount, we're always really alone when you get down
Yeah.
to it. Being able to deal with that loneliness is valuable. I don't take Cthulhu in the sort of extremes that people do, whether it's purely a work of fiction or it's this super spiritual esoteric thing. What I think of the work of Lovecraft is good philosophy. It gets people to explore certain things in themselves that maybe they have difficulty expressing. And what Lovecraft was able to do was to craft a world to which to explore that is still being used to this day, even if it's not used wholesale. It's used in different themes and different books constantly. And his work was definitely reiterated with the writer of Conan. They were close friends. So there's definitely elements of a sort of Lovecraftian theme that are inserted into a lot of fantasy and science fiction to this day.
Yeah. Again, I actually find the old ones to be at least partially literal, if not fully.
I'm sorry, when you say the old ones, what are you referring
That's
to?
Yog-Sothoth, Azathoth, Cthulhu,
Oh, okay.
those ones. They're a lot of people find them spooky. A lot of people say, it's something that you'd experience on Halloween. But
Well, I got into the whole story of Lovecraft actually a month and a half ago. I found
really,
out. Yeah, I knew some of his movies that supposedly his books that were made into movies. Um, recently and the Necronomicon and these things.
well,
But the whole
yeah,
story of Cthulhu was something brand new. Like I was like, wait a minute, I see this character a lot. Let me just read up on him. And I was fascinating how
yeah,
a person at that time came up with these amazing concepts of these aliens and these beings and how they relate to man and animals and other beings. It was just fascinating.
There was
Definitely.
another author that you should check out, and I will remember his name. Um, he wrote Night Side of Eden. With Grant. Grant writes extensively on it, but he kind of Grant is notorious for rambling, and he won't ever get to the point until like the very end of his books, and his history is kind of off at times, which is why a lot of people, other than no one really outside of Poke Runyon, and they're both friends, really takes him too seriously. So I'll shrug at that.
Cool.
Hey Reuben, would you be able to give me an invite to the group or link me to it on Facebook? Because I will gladly join it again. But that's me. You know, yeah.
It's cool, man. Now, the path that I probably forgot the path that you're in now that you're in is Kabbalah.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Hey, what's up? I guess that's Arabic, or is that? Yeah, it's Arabic. I can't read it.
Assalamu alaikum.
Hey
Now,
Frank, do you?
how long have you been to Kabbalah? Like, how long have you?
3 years now.
3 years. Okay.
3 years. Yeah.
Um,
Again, I'm not like every other Kabbalist though. To the point where a lot of people I've talked to consider me more of a Abrahamic conjurer almost.
okay.
So a lot of the pagan aspects I don't heavily get into. Not because I don't like them, but because they haven't really set with me well. I shouldn't say I shouldn't. I just don't. I don't know. I don't feel it. That's the reason. Um, which was interesting because it was my first um experience outside of uh Abrahamic religion that really that really like stuck with me.
Do you consider to be yourself like a monotheist or a deist or a pantheist or
I'd just say atheist.
a theist? Okay.
Yes.
But
Yes.
how about your concepts on God? You know, is it one God or
I do. I do believe. Yeah.
okay, is it
I
monotheist?
believe we're mirror. I mean, hey, if you read Kabbalah, yeah, and also yes, Meyer I have read. Um, it's yeah, it's an interesting what he says. But I never really took it to heart.
It's
Um,
not supposed to be. He tries
yeah,
his best to approach the material with what's available, and
yeah,
is
yeah,
honest about, makes reservations about his own conclusions. But he's him with Willis Barnstone. They've done a lot on the various extra biblical, pseudepigraphic, and apocryphal texts in the Hellenistic and Gnostic kind of worlds. So anything with them in it is usually pretty good stuff. It's a good resource.
I yeah, I read through a little bit and I was just I don't know. Maybe yeah. Um, I'll stick right now. I'm for my Kabbalistic study. I'm reading once again um, through Diane Fortune's Mystical Kabbalah.
Hmm.
So,
That's a classic.
oh, she's such a genius, absolute genius. Um,
Yeah,
So
I recently went to this hangout, not last week because I think it was Purim, but 2 weeks beforehand. I don't think he's a rabbi, but I think he's Kabbalistic, he's Jewish. It was very interesting. Like there was this guy, I was just speaking to him for the first time, and he's one of those guys that I could speak to for like the whole day because I didn't want to keep him, but we actually went through, he actually spoke in some language in Kabbalah. He was talking about it. He asked me if I ever read some of the stuff. I said, look, I just briefly touched upon it one time. Never really got fully into it, but I'm somewhat familiar from the surface of
right,
what it is. But the guy looks like he's really heavy into it. Um,
good, good. I mean, is
yeah.
it what branch is he? Is he the K, the Q, the C?
I have no clue. You see, I don't even know anything like that. That's the first time I ever spoke to somebody that actually do his stuff. Um,
Okay, okay.
but yeah, but definitely. I think Ruben, do you have you know who I'm talking? I can't even pronounce the guy's name. uh, yes, there you go. Yeah, that's
Okay, so he was with the more traditional. All right, cool.
yeah. So hopefully, God willing, I think he's having a thing on Wednesday. I could make it. So I'm gonna go. But not a lot of people know about him. But
He sounds
um,
like
oh, he's a peaceful guy, man. You can actually, when you see his eyes, man, it's just like he's in. There's just a peace about the guy. I
that's
can't
pretty
say
cool.
more good things about him, but the interaction we had, we just connected. I connected anyway with him really quickly.
I think personally, from my standpoint, the traditional method of it is so overlooked. Um, because and I was talking with Kevin about this. In Hermeticism, especially in Hermetic Kabbalah, the aspect of of the mysticism, the peace of it is just it's so vastly overlooked. And all people want to do is like, hey guys, you know, I want to they want to have an experience, but when they want to dive right in and have this incredible otherworldly encounter, and they don't realize, if you want to do that, you first really you have to study the roots, see parts of yourself that's so deeply intertwined, you know, with the divine. And this guy that you were talking about, I'm pretty sure if he's at peace, he has it. That's so cool. I just, it's just not there anymore. Let's see if I can find the guy who's currently, no, not that. He currently leads the Golden Dawn, not the fascist group. I mean the Order. Um, and he, let's see what's his name. David Griffin. I don't know if you guys know about David Griffin. Um,
No.
but but he's gotten to the point where he like accepts the EA coding or co-editing, whatever how you pronounce his name, as legitimate stuff. You see where I'm going? Like, whatever happened to the piece, whatever happened to to the mystical experience, whatever happened to the love. It's just
It's a big problem.
Yeah.
within a lot of modern esotericism, particularly Western occultism, to get far too wrapped up in the formula and not to actually have the
Yeah.
experience. They substitute theurgic ritual with the actual gnosis, which is supposed to be the foundation of the experience itself, as
Right.
all mysticism is. But that's human nature. It's human nature to get caught up in certain actions and thinking that if you just repeat certain actions as they are on paper, that you're going to have a certain response. You just have to have the right combination of things, and then boom.
Yeah.
But if you don't interact, if you don't engage in what the practices are about, and part of that engagement is knowing the study, is knowing the history behind things, the actual content of the material, you're not going to have those experiences. But there's also a sort of philosophy that a lot of people miss out on, and that's that you're going to be doing these things, and it's the same with religious ritual as it is with esoteric ones. You're going to be doing these things, and sometimes nothing happens.
Right.
Sometimes what you learn is very subtle. Sometimes it's not as profound as what people are looking for. But once again, like we've said before, it's a sort of sign of impatience and immaturity, whether the person is 15 or 35. It's normal. It's natural to be in that stage early on because you're excited. You have this certain impetuosity to you about your exploration. So the idea is that you get resources from other people, you crowdsource your information, you constantly are communicating with other people. That helps to ground you. But the most important aspect of grounding is learning patience, is continuing to learn the value of consistency. If you can be consistent, you will eventually have results. You will actually have growth. That's kind of what you were talking about earlier. So I think, like I said, it's best to be patient with these people, and just be honest with them. You get what you get out what you put in.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah.
You reap what you sow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. My only concern is Griffin actually has control over, a relatively large group. And when you say like coding's a legit, practitioner, which if you believe that, I'm sorry for you. That he, it just I wish people would see what's going on, but the majority don't. It's just I don't know.
That's on them, man.
It's
That's
on them.
And this may seem like a weird sort of way of looking at it, but if everybody knew, then why would it be a mystery?
That's true. That's true.
Mystery traditions are that way for a reason, because it's
That's very true.
not commonly understood.
Yeah, I've heard that before. It's just I guess, I've heard a lot of people say, the mystery traditions are finally starting to go back underground.
I could see that.
That they're finally, I personally believe if this is what God intends, this is what God intends. It's not meant for everyone.
But neither is any specific religious belief.
Right,
people are going to go things in a different way.
I think, though, it was attracting a lot of wrong people. It was attracting a lot of people who thought it was okay to hurt others with it.
Well, they need to study the 7 Hermetic Laws, because it talks about what happens when you do those sorts of things.
Right.
And what happens to you. It may not happen immediately, but it will. That stuff comes back to you. But, the same could be said of anything, really.
It could be said. I'm just hoping that this is true. I want everyone to think we're devils. I want everyone to do that, because it's gonna keep away the people who don't.
Who aren't serious.
Yeah.
Who don't seriously want to examine themselves. I mean, that's the most important thing about mysticism, is self-exploration. And arguably that's basically the same with philosophy, and the relationship between philosophy and mystery tradition are very, very close. Hence the reason why Neoplatonism was a little of both. It was both a philosophical tradition, a school, as well as a mystery tradition, which became progressively more liturgic as it was later on in its history. But that's for another date. But yeah, there needs to be a little bit of that, a little bit of taboo, a little bit of hesitancy to prevent the wrong kinds of people from going into certain things. But we could look at any spiritual tradition here, and the proof is in the pudding. What kind of Wicca are they doing? What kind of spirituality in general? Whatever religion it is. And usually the people who have the most shallow character are going to practice the most shallow version of their tradition. So that's on them. If they want to have an in-depth understanding of some of these ideas, they're going to have to work. They're going to have to work. They're going to have to study. They're going to have to do trial and error, and they're going to have to be patient. But few people learn patience, myself included. I largely had to learn patience the hard way. And I think there's some value in effing up. You know, when you fail miserably at what you think you're doing, sometimes it's a good way to step out of yourself and learn a little humility and learn that, okay, I need to be consistent. I need to go back to the drawing board and okay. And I was fortunate to have experiences that kind of hit me like a ton of bricks, kind of giving me this information, and it was able to really lead me along the path that I'm on currently. But, you know, that's not everyone's experience.
No, it's not.
It's not everyone's experience. So, and there's very little that you can do about that. There isn't. I mean, I don't want to be harsh with this, but there's nothing you can do. All you can do, the only thing I say you can do, is spread good information. Give good resources to those who will listen. And talk to those who are of a similar bent to you. Share that information and have, for lack of a better word, fellowship with those kinds of individuals. But if they're not willing to listen, they're not willing to listen.
All right, hey Frank, you just want to talk about your life lately? Because I'm interested in hearing what you have to say.
Oh, me? Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah.
I was in the Marines. That's my life.
You were in the Marines?
Yeah, I was in the Marines.
What about recently? Like, what's been happening with you recently?
Well, as you well know, I am a Sufi. I belong to the Mevlevi order. And I'm just going to talk about, you know, the spiritual component, you know, from my life.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up Catholic, and I had amazing experience while I was a Catholic. I used to love going to church, so much so that I just used to go by myself.
Yeah.
But there was a period of my life that, you know, and I was young. I was very young. I didn't know anything about scripture or anything like that. I just enjoy the art scenery. I think for me, I was always a very visual person. You know, I took my dreams very seriously, and I took my imaginations, you know, very seriously. As far as, you know, me thinking about things, and hence I used to be very artistic, and still am. I guess there was a period where that didn't matter, you know, because I didn't go to church, and I guess, you know, I was going through other things. In high school, you know, I went out with a couple people, you know, females, you know, I used to go to their churches and experience their things, but I was never really into it. That was all crap, you know. I think after that, when I went to college, that's when the world started opening up more. I got into like anarchist thoughts. That's the first time, like, I got into like a guy named by Noam Chomsky.
Oh, I know Chomsky.
Yeah, very radical. But then I started reading upon Gnostics, which I found fascinating. I was like, I didn't know anything about. I know very little about the Bible, but the Gnostics always fascinated me. I think this is radical. This is something that is against the grain. So, you know, it's during my rebellious years and how they were so anti-establishment, and I loved it, you know. But there was also a very visual component too. which I really enjoy. The artistry, the imagination, um, and I knew a couple of fellows that were really into Egyptology, and that's when I went towards like yoga and Hinduism, which blew my mind. I was so like intrigued by it, and at one point I did yoga for a very long time, and I can still do it. At one point I wanted to be some type of yogi, but something was missing about it that I didn't really like, and then hence I went to the military and got into like some Pentecostalism and some experience. And that's when I knew I was really into experiencing things, experiencing divine. Um, I started, before that, I started having these dreams, and they were very vivid. But one time I heard the Adhan, which I never heard before, but I think I first heard it in my dreams. And I don't want to get too much detailed on this dream because the dream was very vivid for me. But one day, God willing, I will explain it. But I want to learn a little bit more about Islam. And when I first read the Quran, I think I was a little kind of freaked out by it because they started talking about the story of Moses. It was really crazy the way they were explaining it, but they were explaining it very poetically, which I found very interesting. And I knew a lot of Muslims. I hung out with a lot of Muslims, but they never really practiced. It was more of an identity, and I never really got into it. But there was this guy, he starts talking about it. I think he was trying to convert me, but I didn't really pay no mind. And I met this girl, and I was like, I'm really interested in her, and I was like, and so I guess I wanted to learn more about her, so I went to the mosque, and at one point I just felt something. I said, you know what, I'm just going to convert. I'm going to see how it's like. And I remember feeling great about it, but this mosque was a Salafi mosque, was a very hardline mosque, which I didn't know anything about. And then the things that they started talking about really bothered me. And the sense of feeling spiritual things that was just leaving. And I was just going to be like, you know what? I'm not even going to follow this thing. This is ridiculous. Until one point I said, all right, let me just try to give this a chance and let me see what's going on. And then I started looking at the website and Rumi and the stuff the poems that he was saying, it was just like, wow, this is not what I was being taught. So I went to give it a shot, and I went to a retreat. And during that retreat, I couldn't believe what was happening. I heard the Quran in the room by myself, and this was like 2 days from the retreat, and the words just started appearing. Like this was an intense spiritual experience I was having. I couldn't believe what was happening. And then one time I saw them whirling, and no lie, I could see the universe just whirling like the Milky Way. And I was actually seeing it. But it was not so much the visualization, it was more how I felt. It was not about what was more belief, but it was how I felt. And I just fell in love. I said, this is my home. And it's been 13 years.
I do have a question. There's a lot of controversy in Islam about, and I understand you're Sufi, so you're obviously not with the main line, the main two of the Shiite or Sunni.
Well, usually the way it works is like more Sufis are really Sunnis in a sense.
Really?
There's
Okay.
very few Shiites that are Sufis, but like the word Sufism, there's two aspects to it. There's traditional Sufism, and there is non-traditional Sufism, which would be non-Islamic. Some people are not Muslims, but they yet to be Sufis.
Oh,
Some
okay.
people are Muslims, which is the mainline Sufism. They're Muslims, but they're Sufis. It's a path. Um, so it's works that way if you understand.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Usually the sheikhs, and the people who starts the orders usually are people who were scholars traditionally. They're really there's a term called fiqh. Fiqh is like Islamic law. So a lot of the people who started these orders are in depth in those type of rules. There's schools of thought. There's 5 schools of thought within Islam, and usually people follow those mahabs, meaning the schools.
okay.
Yeah, but it goes very in depth, and but within its surface, it's very accepting. It's very open, and it's very esoteric.
Nah, that's
And they have the literal part. There's a literal meaning, but there's also the esoteric meanings.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I remember reading about that.
yeah. But it's a beautiful practice, and
It's
I'm very grateful that I'm enjoying it. I'm happy with it. So I'm very grateful to be part of it. I
so
hope that in a
so
nutshell explains it.
so what's the big difference between Sufism and the other?
A lot of, let's say, there's these Salafists, which is called predecessors, and they're usually I should I should say the more literalists. They look at the scripture very one-dimensional.
Mm,
But not only that, they interpret the way they want to interpret it, um, to fit their ideology in the sense of how they want things run. And usually it's very cultural. And that's why you have different mahabs, because different mahabs, they're from different regions.
mm,
And usually the Salafists are more the Imam Shafi around Saudi Arabia and some of the Bedouin view of how things was back in the days of the Prophet,
mm.
and that's the
Yeah,
way to interpret it.
that's
But there's other mahabs that that they don't look at it that way. But it's all, I should say, the Salafists are not even the school of thought. They came later on, and they felt that we have to live in this type of century because it's the best century, and that's it. But their way of thinking, I think it's kind of flawed.
mm. Okay. It's cool. Like, because Islam's one thing I'm not very, the one Abrahamic religion that I'm not very in tune with. So, the more I can learn about it, the more I can become educated with it. It's always good.
Yeah, it's very vast. There's a lot of things to it, and uh, I and the proper word, because the word Sufi is a misnomer. The proper word for Sufi is tasawwuf, meaning the way of purifying. It's pure. It's a way of purification, and
Okay.
that's how usually the proper term for it. But I really feel that anybody could be Sufi if they want to. There's a phrase that Rumi says that come again. If you broke your vows 100 times, if you're an idol worshiper, a fire worshiper, doesn't matter. Just come. No matter how many times you just come.
Mm,
He's always accepting no matter what, and they're
that's
welcoming
beautiful.
you for open arms. So it was a very beautiful saying, and never felt out of place, and so
Wow.
it's a very welcome, you know, I guess philosophy, if you want to call it.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me.
Wow. That's beautiful.
But thanks.
Oh.
That's why I kind of love going to these chat because I learned too. Like
Yeah.
I really got into the Noahide Nexus, which definitely isn't. I never was into the Bible until I got to Noahide Nexus.
Mm.
Because I felt bad because I never really gave it a chance. I never really, I was looking it through the lens of others, but I think with the Jewish perspective, it actually makes it very interesting.
Yeah. You can. The other thing I've gotten into heavily is gematria and numerology. That's the other thing. It's been wonderful for me. Um, for divination, for everything. Um, and if you want to, the one thing I like doing is I go to this website often for any of my rituals. I include a numerical, sorry, um, aspect to whatever I'm going to be invoking. So, say like sun, S-U-N. You know, um, in Jewish gematria, which is usually the one I go by. I don't usually go by the English. Would be 330, and whenever I invoke that, I look for those letters throughout my day just to see how it corresponds with me. It's pretty interesting. Um,
You ever saw that movie Pi?
Pi, no,
Oh, you gotta see it, man.
really? Is it
Oh
pretty good?
yeah, if you like numbers, man, this one is
Really?
it's really good. It's with the symbol pi.
Okay, this is a simple Pi. I'll try. I'll look at.
Yeah, good movie. It's in black and white. He's the same guy who did Requiem for a Dream.
Okay, all right.
You
So it's
got
gonna
it?
be like that. It's gonna be
No,
like
no, it's
that.
not gonna be like that though.
No?
No, no, it's not gonna be crazy like that. Not, but he did that movie. But this is the one he did before. He's actually in it. He's the main character. It's
All
about a
right.
mathematician. Yeah.
All right. All right. Hmm. Let's see. What else is fun? Um. What? So anyone else want to share something?
Yeah, I think people left.
Yeah, it's getting kind of late. I have an early morning tomorrow, but I don't even care.
I have something interesting to share.
Go ahead.
I didn't want to jump in because it's totally random. It does have to do with the core thing of the group, though. You were mentioning divination before,
Right.
and I have, over the last couple of years, used a divination technique that's derived from the older Greek and Roman method of using dice. For those of you that don't know, dice and cards pretty much were interchangeably used for both divination and gaming, as for their entire history. And some of the earliest card games that we have basically resembled more of what we have as modern cards and less like what tarot looks like. Following thus far?
Mhm.
Okay. So the method that I was using before uses five six-sided dice. There is a method to use four-sided dice, but the way that the method I had constructed uses six sides just fine. And what you do is there's values from 5 to 30, and you omit two values, 13 and 25, which are sort of out of sequence. There's 24 hours in a day and 12 hours in a clock, 12 Olympians, the whole thing. And each one of those 24 values are tied to a specific letter, and each of the letters has a specific meaning from the record that that's used. There was some Pythian oracle, specifically Apollo, and there was a set of meanings ascribed to each of the letters, and it's worked fairly well. And I was interested in, I was researching just different ways that it was done, and I discovered this book called Oracle Bones Divination, the Greek I Ching. And I looked at this, I was skeptical. It's relegating it to the I Ching, so this can't really be all that great. And I looked through it, and it was made by a guy by the name of Kostas Devernis, and so he's Greek. It's like, okay. So I started reading a little bit. The reviews were pretty good. And I was like, it's $10 for the Kindle version. So I bought the Kindle version and read through it. I read through it last night. This guy actually does a historical reconstruction.
Really?
He organizes the book in such a manner that anybody, quotations, could use it, but he does clear representation of the Greek gods. The way that this is oriented, that this is an ancient Greek method. And I was like, okay, this is interesting, so I kept reading. The way he does it is he uses the classical method of sheep bones. Traditionally, they used sheep bones, the sheep knuckle. And sheep knuckles are four-sided. There's two sides and then two large sides. There's a convex and a concave and two sides to the knuckle, one long, one short. So there's four sides. And I was familiar with this already with the method I use, because that's one of the ways that you can do the alphabet oracle is using sheep bones. I'm like, oh, this is kind of interesting. And the way the method works with sheep bones is it uses sacred geometry. Instead of 1 through 6, it uses 4 values: 1, 3, 4, and 6. So, and I researched a little bit. That's why 6 is sort of an unlucky number, because you can't get 6 with this method. 5 four-sided dice, it's impossible to get 6. It skips over one value, because 6 is an unlucky number in ancient Greece. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. And so what is he doing? What's different about this? He found from various different temples there were Greek stanzas, like whole quotations, that were associated with each one of these values. There were over 56 values. Actually, no, it was exactly 56 different stanzas. Because with this method, like a lot of them, there's multiple values. So there's like 3 different ways of getting 18, 4 different ways of getting like 24, something like that. Some of them only have 1 value, but that's what makes it interesting. It's a very sophisticated system, and it's but also simple. The reason why it's like I Ching is he gave an alternate method, because not everyone can get sheep bones. You use 3 coins. 3 coins to roll for each individual value, and then instead of rolling 5 dice all at once. So it takes longer, but that's actually pretty sophisticated, because 3 heads is 1, 2 heads and a tail is 3, 2 tails and a head is 4, and 3 tails is 6. But I use gaming dice. I've been a tabletop player for a long time, and I know there are four-sided tetrahedral dice, what are called D4s.
Yeah.
So I went to the store, spent $5, and got 5 D4s. So
I use basically just playing cards. Those seem to work best for me.
Oh, playing card cartomancy is pretty good. I have some interesting definitions I could probably share with you later.
Yeah. Where do you get your definitions from?
Online.
Yeah.
When I was using playing cards, it's not one that I personally use, but I find it interesting. For me, it's a little difficult, but a lot of people who are hardcore into tarot say that playing card is basically just like reading the minor arcana, which it kind of is, because the minor arcana has the court cards and then 1 through 10. But
again, yeah, I honestly do not have a tarot deck right now, so
Sure.
I don't think I need one, in truth.
But here's the thing: playing card divination is different than what people think. The suits are different. The way the cards are relegated is totally different than the tarot. And some of the earliest forms of card divination were basically with what you're using. The earliest Italian and French means of tarot were actually done with that method. And modern tarot is modern. It's like 19th century on. That's when they started developing the major arcana. And speaking honestly, divination was used with ordinary devices. That's why dice and cards were used so commonly with divination. There's something cool about being out in public with a deck of cards. It looks like you're just playing solitaire, but you're giving yourself or a friend divination while you're on your laptop. And it's part of the reason why I like dice, because the dice was really used by the Greeks and the Romans. And
that's cool.
This method is really cool, and it has a list. What I'm thinking of doing is taking the meanings from, where did I put them? Anyway, I got little tiny notebooks, like the little ones that you can get, and I'm going to write down all the meanings. There's 56 of them. So I was going to write a single meaning with all the numbers and annotate it on each page, so I can take that with me in a little baggie with the and I'll probably get multiple of these dices, because I like having different dice sets. One for travel, one for home, one for this shrine, one for that shrine. And it's inexpensive. Finding knucklebone dice would be kind of difficult. I know a few sites that sell resin casts of actual sheep knuckles for like $20.
Yeah, that would be kind of pricey.
Yeah, I just don't know if I might do that maybe as a specialty thing, specifically for my altar. I might do that later, but I like D4s. They're smaller, and the thing is with D4s, when you throw them, they hit the table and they don't move around. They lie flat. They spin and they lie flat. So, and they're very quiet. Like, you hear this. It's not very loud. Yeah. But you could also do it in a little dish, like a little wooden dish. They're also much smaller, so they get a really good spread. And I really like the method is really cool. So I wanted to share that with you because I know some friends who are heathens who do runes, and obviously there's gematria and all sorts of things. And this is a method that echoes a lot of the other methods throughout the Near East and the Mediterranean, where people would use writings as means of divination.
Yeah.
And people have actually done that with the Bible, particularly with the Old Testament. They would find a particular number and then would relegate it to a specific passage, and that would be their wisdom. So that's kind of how the I Ching is constructed. You use the coins, or use tarot, or the tarot root, or the I think they're yarrow. No, excuse me, it's yarrow sticks. Yarrow sticks or coins, I believe, are the two main ones. And through several rolls or spins, you get tetragrams or tetragrams, specific number sets, and then the final total you use, and then there's a specific meaning behind that. In Chinese religion, there's specific elements and different ways of going about it, so it's really sophisticated.
I mean, I find stuff with dice. Dice is, I did not know.
Yeah, yeah, dice is really. I actually had an interesting method that I developed that I think you might enjoy. I actually looked at the old meanings of the Phoenician alphabet and Ugaritic and Hebrew alphabet, because as I'm sure you're aware, studying Kabbalah, each one of the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet have specific meanings.
Yep.
So ayin is I, for instance. Aleph is ox, and you could take those symbols and use that as a system. So if you were to get that specific letter, that would be a specific divinatory meaning.
Okay.
You get what I'm getting at? But what was interesting is it's very difficult to get 22 with dice. So then I was looking at some systems, some guys who were it was a little bit of gaming, but it was also people doing mathematics and looking at systems. And I found a really interesting method that somebody did where they used tetrads. They would use one dice to designate specific tetrads of numbers. So there's, I'm trying to remember, use a D4 and I'm trying to think what it was. I had it in my bag somewhere. to get 22. I think it was a D4 and a D6.
Mm.
But 4 sets of 6 is... oh, yeah. Okay, what I did is it's a D4 and a D6, and you take out the numbers 6 and 13. So you omit those numbers. Those numbers don't exist. And that allows you to get 22.
Okay.
Instead of the 5 D6s, which gives you 26 values, and you omit 2. It was something like that. I can show you the system. I think I have it on a file here. I usually keep my note files and stuff like that around. Just need to find it real quick. It'll take me about a minute. Oh no, I have it on my Facebook. That'll help me real quick. Notes. I don't want to give you the wrong information here. I think the way they have notes structured in Facebook is a little annoying. It can be hard to find your own. Okay, the Phoenician Oracle. The system uses one 4-sided die and one 6-sided die, and uses a mathematical system of tetrads, where the D4 designates which set of 6s, and the D6 designates the number within the set. So, for instance, if you rolled a 1 on the D4 and 6, it's 6. If you rolled a 2 and a 6, it's 12. If you roll a 2 and a 3, it's 6 plus 3, 9. So it's tetrads, 4 systems of 6. And then you omit the values, 6 and 13. 13 is traditionally an unlucky number in many cultures, so that works out. And 6 seems to have a somewhat unlucky connotation in ancient Hebrew as well as Greek. So, and then maybe not as strongly, but like I said, you could change it up if you. Once again, it's not a system that's necessarily used, but
I don't know. I'll get into it. I'll look into it.
There's the meanings that I was able to discern. I just posted it in the side.
Okay. And so these you were up by yourself?
Yeah. I took the words that I was able to find, and
okay. No. All right. I think I'm gonna head to bed too.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you for showing up. It was appreciated. It's good hearing from you again.
I might take this idea, but I'm probably gonna write my own definitions.
You absolutely should. This is just my interpretation.
Because they're also as well. There's also you need to take the geometric value, the geometric value.
Exactly.
Of each one.
It was just a one-off because I have some friends who are Canaanite polytheists, and drawing lots was something that existed is in Canaan as it did in ancient Greece. So I figured I'd show you that as a system. It's a D4, a 4-sided die, and a D6 with a standard like dice you would use for typical games, a square die.
Right. Maybe I'll just get a couple square die and use that then. All right. Well, I'll talk to you later then.
Take care.